Welcome, folks, to another piano lesson with Warren. As you can see, I'm not the only one here today. I've been joined by my friend David Hutchinson, another Caribbean guy too.
Yep.
He's from the Bahamas. So you were born in the United States, but spent most of your life in the Bahamas, right?
Yeah, so I was born in Houston, and then when I was 7 years old, I moved to Nassau, Bahamas. And then when I was 17, I moved back to the States for college, so yeah.
Yeah, another Caribbean guy. And to my knowledge, we are the only two Caribbean folks. I'm from Jamaica, teaching, piano with more of a gospel Christian style. So that's awesome. David runs the channel over at Worship Leader Hangouts. Tell us what you guys do over there.
So you can't say David by himself because it's really Chad Buckland and David Hutchinson. And,
do it.
We've been running the channel for the past 7 years. Chad called me up in 2013 and Chad was like, hey man, I'm thinking about starting a YouTube channel. And really we were brand new worship leaders at the churches we were at. And so it was really a way for us to help each other. And, for the first 3 years, nobody watched the channel, only our moms, I guess. And then after that, Chad came up with a video just talking about how to design a stage. That was something he was working on at his church. We worked on the things that, we were working on. So he comes out with the video, and that video did pretty well, and the channel's been doing pretty well ever since. So.
Yes, they have well over 80,000 subscribers over there now, doing well. They not only teach stuff about piano, but everything worship music.
Anything to do with worship leading. So Chad came up with a video a couple of weeks ago about in-ear monitors. We've talked about how do you lead your team, how do you deal with an unruly team member, things like that. So we talk about anything and everything worship leading. So yeah.
Great. I still need to watch a lot more of the videos over there. I've seen quite a few, but not everything. So today, David is going to teach us something new that he's been working on. What you got for us?
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the diminished scale. And I learned this scale back in college, probably 8 years ago, and by a buddy named Josh Howard. And I have to give him credit because there's been a couple of things that Josh has showed me that it was too over my head at the time, and it took me years to process. And so I don't get to play gospel music all the time. I work for a white church, and I'm not saying they're white just for the sake of it, but we know that white churches don't sing gospel music most Sundays, right? So,
yeah.
However, I did grow up playing gospel music. And and so every time when I'm asked, to play gospel music, I find that there's this scale that a lot of gospel musicians don't realize they're playing in many of the songs. And so I'm going to give you an example of it here. The song that I realized it was on was a song called Lord You Are Good from Todd Delaney. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so...
I like that movement right there.
So when I first did it, I had been messing around the diminished scale for a couple of years. Remember this, okay? So I heard it, and I realized, wait a minute, I know where that's coming from. So I looked at the chords, I analyzed it, and I realized, oh my gosh, those are the chords from the diminished scale. Okay.
So let's back that up a little bit. The diminished scale you just played there, was that B diminished?
Yeah, that's the B diminished scale. So, and that's the B diminished scale starting from the half step, whole step position. So, what is the diminished scale? There are really two types of diminished scales, or two formulas for it, right? So there's the half step, whole step formula, and then there's the whole step, half step formula. Okay?
Yeah.
This diminished scale right there is following the half step, whole step formula. Okay? So it is a B, and if you use the formula, you have half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Okay? And
so those chords that you're playing, what are those chords?
These chords right here are B diminished, C diminished, D diminished, E flat diminished, and then it just keeps following that pattern up until it gets to the F.
Oh, so it's just building a diminished chord on each of those scales degrees.
Each of those scale degrees, exactly. And it stops on the 5. So
nice.
So a lot of people in gospel music, they use it all the time, right? Like this is a common move that you hear in gospel music. We're going to be in the key of F, and we are going to use the A diminished scale. But before we get there, I want to show you what we all hear all the time, right? Right? It's a very common move, right? And then some guys, you know, they might do that with like in thirds. And then when some of them realize, oh, wait a minute, I can play chords with that, they might actually play chords, right? So they'll play like an A7, a G over B, an A over C sharp to the D minor, right? Well, the diminished scale allows us to take that a bit further. So here we can utilize the G diminished scale, which would be, if we're using the half step, whole step pattern. Right, so let me go over that slowly. We're using a G, so a half step to A flat, whole step, B flat, half step B, whole step D flat, half step D, whole step E, half step F, whole step G. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is instead of playing the A7, the B over G, the A over C sharp to the D minor, we're actually going to play a B flat diminished to a B diminished to a C sharp diminished to a D. Right? So when we're making this video, we're making a couple of assumptions, okay? We're making the assumption that you already know what a diminished chord is, that you already have like a foundation of like, you know, what an A7 might be or what minor chords or major chords might be, all right? So I'm apologizing now for not going over some of these terms. I'm just making the assumption that you know what they are.
Yeah, this is a more intermediate advanced lesson, folks.
Yeah, it really is, right? So now that we know that we're utilizing the diminished chords from this G diminished scale, or you could think of it as a B flat diminished scale, or a C sharp diminished scale, or E diminished scale. It really doesn't matter, because the truth is there are only 3 diminished scales. But we're not going to really go into that right now. We just want to talk about application, right? So now that we know it's coming from this diminished scale, well, we can do all sorts of things from this diminished scale that are actually related to this A chord, right? So I can actually play all of these chords on top of this A note right here, which is still based on the 5 to the minor 1 progression, right? So okay, so now we can do a run, right? So we're going to do a run based off of that same scale. So the run is going to be, okay, so instead of playing this, we can now hold down, let's say like an A major of some kind, so like an A augmented 7 or whatever, right? And then we can...
And is that the diminished scale you're playing in the right hand right there?
Yes, that's the diminished scale, just walking down. So, and I'm using that diminished scale over this same G chord, this G diminished chord, even though in the back of my mind I'm really thinking an A7 flat 9.
Yeah.
You follow what I'm saying?
But if you look right there in the right hand forms diminished chord.
Exactly. Exactly. The right
So
hand
that
is
means you
forming
can use the diminished
chord.
scale.
So now I'm going to think, I'm thinking A of some kind, and now I'm doing this run. So,
Slow down that run so they see what it looks like.
so it's a G, F, E, D, C sharp. I don't even remember my fingering. G, F, E, D, C sharp, B, B flat, A flat, B flat, A flat, G. Oh, and then when I continue the fingering, because that's probably one of the most important things too, right? Is I'm actually only using really a 3-note fingering. I started off with like 4, 3, 2, and 1, like 4, 3, 2, and 1 with the fingers. But then once I make it down, I just use only these 3 fingers, right? So, and that's something that I find with using the diminished scale. Most times I'm only using like 3 fingers to play them. So.
Yeah. Same thing goes with the blues scale.
Yeah.
At least 3.
But it's actually interesting. So I think the reason why we use this a lot in gospel music, and we don't realize it, is there are 4 blues scales in 1 diminished scale. So, like for example, we're still on this like G diminished scale, right? There's going to be a G blues scale. It's only missing the 4th degree of the scale. There's a B flat blues scale. It's only missing the 4th degree of the scale. There's a C sharp blues scale or D flat blues scale. It's only missing the 4th degree, and an E blues scale. Same thing, only missing the 4th degree. So I think this is kind of like, in a way, like taking gospel music like to like a more like intense scale than the 5-note scale, right? So I've been working on Amazing Grace a lot lately. The reason is I'm kind of like trying to get like to a lot of the roots of gospel music. So I like contemporary gospel, but it's kind of went in a different direction musically, and I'm trying to discover a lot of the roots. So like Amazing Grace is one of those songs, and the reason for that is it only uses 5 notes. Right? That's all that's in the melody. And the gentleman that wrote this song, he was actually a slave ship captain, and it's assumed that he heard many of the slaves on board sing a similar melody. Now, his life was transformed by the gospel, and he no longer he actually tried to free slaves after an experience with Christ. But this was a melody that he heard, and it's through that melody that he wrote the song Amazing Grace. And so I figured, this was a scale that a lot of the slaves were using, right? I'm sure they weren't calling them. This is
built off the pentatonic, huh?
Built off the pentatonic, exactly. So I've been trying to discover the roots of gospel. So that's what's led me to doing Amazing Grace. Anyway.
All right. All right, gonna have to back you up so you can slow that down right there.
Okay, so
that movement you just did to take you to 4.
So we're talking diminished scales again, right? So I'm thinking there's a long explanation, and I guess we're doing long explanations today. So think of it like this, right? You're doing a 2-5-1 of B flat, or you're doing a
2-5-5 and then go to B flat. Cool.
Right. Okay, so that's the progression. Now, how do we add to that progression? Well, so that's really what I'm doing. Now I've changed my chord from a C minor 9 to an F13 to a B flat to a C minor 9 to a F7 flat 9 to a B flat.
And then we can use that diminished scale because
now
of
we
that
can
introduction
use
of
the
flat
diminished
9.
scale, and the reason for that is because this. What my music teacher always taught me this. He said, David, what are the most important notes of a chord? The most important, I would say like, oh, the 1 and the 3. He would say, no, you're wrong. The 1 is not the most important note of a chord. He would say the 3 and the 7. Right? And if you look at the diminished scale here that I'm utilizing, which the most, I have the 1, sorry, I have the 3 of the F, and I have the flat 7 of the F in that diminished scale, right? So
good.
So now that I know I have the 1 and the 7 in that diminished scale, I mean I have in that diminished scale. This is the appropriate diminished scale that I could use. But this is what we're doing. So this is a diminished scale here. We're using let's say a C diminished scale. And we are walking down parallel motion from, I'm going up in my right hand, right? So I'm going,
and that's just going through the C diminished scale.
Yeah.
Building a diminished scale on each degree of the scale.
At each degree of the scale. But then in my left hand, I'm walking in this parallel motion, right? So.
Nice, and that takes you back to like your flat 9 rootless voicing right there.
Yeah, it takes me to the B flat, to the 4, right? So it's kind of, you said rootless voicing, and that's a very good thing. Not to pull in a plug for us, but I actually have an exercise where we do the rootless voicings that allow you to get from the 2 to a 5 that's diminished, but it's rootless to the 1. Okay, and we have a series and we have a chart on that on our website. Okay,
cool.
So then sweet the sound. Okay, now we went over that already.
A going to D minor.
Yes, it's an A going to D minor except it's rootless, and I'm starting on the B flat, right?
So cool.
All right, so now all that was diminished, right? Okay, but it's not. That's really not following the diminished scale so much as it's kind of following my ears and.
Yeah, it's a movement that's fairly common in gospel.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I have I once
was lost.
Now that we know what diminished scale we can use, we don't have to do the same pattern, right? So I once was lost. Right? All that is
Woo! The master of the diminished scale.
Yeah,
That's
all
dope.
that is
That's dope.
right from the diminished scale. Okay, so when we went over most of them, right? All right.
And so, just to recap a few things, mostly you're working with the half step, whole step diminished pattern.
Yeah, mostly I'm working with that. But the truth is, right, like, it's all how your mind thinks. So sometimes I'm actually working with the other pattern. It just depends. So each...
And you got to use your ears, yeah?
Yeah, you do have to use your ears. The thing about it is this. Each diminished chord actually belongs to 2 scales. So, for example, this G diminished scale, right? It belongs to the whole step, half step pattern. belongs to that pattern, so I can utilize the G diminished run over it, right? It also belongs to the... So, actually, I played the wrong run just now. I should have used this, see, because I do it so much. So, you have this G diminished scale, right? You have the G diminished chord, and then you have a flat diminished chord, and then you have a B flat diminished chord, a B diminished chord, and you can keep going on and on. So I can utilize that G diminished run, which actually comes from this scale right here, which is the F diminished scale, right? So I can utilize an F run on this G diminished scale, or I can utilize this run right here. So you have two. You have this one, right? And then...
So what are those two runs?
So this one here is following, like, I guess you can say the A diminished scale, right? So with the half step, whole step. So I'm starting on a B flat, but I'm thinking from the A perspective. But it's going down, it's B flat, A, G, F sharp, E, E flat, D flat, C, B flat, A, right? Or I can utilize the other scale that it belongs to, which would be the G. And we went over that one already. So each chord, each diminished chord has two scales that could fit into it.
Yeah.
And it's based off of if you're following the whole step, half step pattern or the half step, whole step pattern. So I know that's a lot to chew. Goodness gracious, it's a lot for me to chew. But a lot of times, when I think of a concept, right, like I don't so much dive into the concept as can I play the concept, and do I kind of understand where it's coming from. And once I kind of understand where it's coming from, I'm like, okay, everything's golden now. I know what I'm going to do. So
that's great, man. This is definitely a big meal right here. This is something that will need to be revisited multiple times, guys. You know, I know a lot about the diminished scale and the diminished chord, but the application that David just taught us today, that's something I'm going to need to refresh my brain on too and look at some of the movements. So basically one of the things that I also see jumped out at me is that whenever you have a dominant 7 flat 9th chords, you can most likely do those walks.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So I'm starting to see some clues and patterns right there. Lots of stuff, lots of nuggets in this. And for my more beginner folks, I know that you might be like, what the? I can't understand any of this, you know. Over time you will. It is definitely an intermediate advanced concept. But just listen to the sound that it brings. It definitely pushes you into that gospel sound that you've been hearing. But what are those? Diminished movements, diminished scales. Start working on that. Two types of diminished scales. Half step, whole step, half step pattern. Yeah. So I want to thank, go ahead.
Go ahead. Something to think about is, remember, this is something that I've been chewing on for like 8 years.
Yeah.
And the first 3 of those, I only played the scale. I did nothing else with it, right? And
yeah, just get used to the scale.
Yeah. So it took a while for my ears to become adjusted to it. And I'm still learning it. You know, I'm still learning its application. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things that once you dive into it, you realize it's kind of bottomless in terms of the routes you can take. So do you have any PDFs on this anything on this you want to share?
Yeah, so at worshipleaderhangout.com, there is a PDF. It's actually disguised as a rootless voicing PDF. So I say 251 rootless voicing, which would be this.
And we'll post the link. We'll post the link down in the description of the video, so you can access that easily.
And that's a really good entry point into this scale because, so really I'm playing a D minor 7 to a G7 to a G7 flat 9 to a C major 7. Well, that G7 flat 9 is a rootless voicing. And if you take out the root, you have a diminished chord. And that kind of gets you an entry point into hearing the diminished chord outside of an application that you might not be familiar with using. So.
That's great. That's great. Man, this was a wonderful lesson. So much nuggets packed. I know a lot of you guys might be saying, we need more. We need more explanation and further breakdown because, we could create multiple series of lessons just based on this concept. But we're going to keep it short because I want to respect Davin's time. It's a busy time for us with all this coronavirus. It's messing with a lot of our schedules and stuff like that. So I'm glad that we were able to still make this happen for you guys. Whet your appetite with some new information to get you closer to that gospel sound. Davin, do you got any final words for folks? Davin?
No, but as we say on Worship Leader Hangout, always remember that great worship leaders are always learning. And the reason why we say that is because we believe that everybody that is leading a congregation is a worship leader, right? So if you have any responsibility in that, whether you're a piano player, drummer, a singer, background singer, you're a choir member, you are a worship leader. And so we always like to say, just remember, great worship leaders are always learning. So.
And here at Piano Lesson with Warren, we always say, keep listening, keep singing, and keep practicing because that's how you continue to grow as a musician. Thanks again, Davin, for coming on here and giving us some great information. I'm sure that we won't see the last of you. And you guys go check out Worship Leader Hangouts. There are a lot of other information over there that doesn't relate to piano playing, but definitely relates to being a worship leader that I'm sure you'll find helpful. All right, so thanks again for watching and see you next week.